right. Okay. I just want to, as I'm doing the introduction for Tom this week, any of my co-hosts, if you hear a doorbell, if you want to let any joining participants into the meeting, that would help me out a great deal. I want to remind anybody within the meeting that if you could, please just put your microphones on mute so as not to interfere with the recording and how everything is going to show up for our asynchronous viewers later. I'm going to go ahead and give a brief introduction, and then we will get the show on the road. So today we have artist Tom Lang. Tom is an artist and professor here at Webster University who lives in St. Louis, Missouri. He earned both an MA in aesthetic education and an MFA in printmaking and drawing at Ohio State University. Later, he studied with printmaking S.W. Hayter and Krishna Reddy at Atelier 17 in Paris. After a workshop with Garner Tullis, founder of the International Institute of Experimental Printmaking, he began his own self-imposed apprenticeship to study the history and techniques of hand papermaking. His selected exhibitions include Hopkins Gallery, Columbus, Second International Paper Triennial in Charny, Switzerland, Texas Tech University, Lubbock, Texas, Wagner Museum, Southern Illinois University, Ballarat University, Australia, Hoffman, LeChance Contemporary, St. Louis, among many others locally, nationally, and internationally. He has conducted numerous workshops, lectures, and demonstrations in the US and abroad, and his work has been exhibited throughout the US and in Europe. He also wanted everyone to know that his dog's name is Tex. And he has been to a John Cage concert in person. So if you ever want to ask him about it, you should. And finally, without further ado, welcome our very own Tom Lang.
Hey, Tom.
Hello. Hello. Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks, Emily. I actually just have to correct. I gave Emily a prompt at the beginning saying that often we ask artists what they want us to say about them, and I gave the example of, well, my dog's named Tex, and my dog isn't named Tex. I don't have a dog. But that was an example, but that's good. It's a good way to begin. Sorry, Emily.
That's all right.
And I think we're beginning with Martin Lang, who's professor at South Carolina State University, and is my son, and has grown up kind of on the sidelines and watching me make things for years and years, and then recently has become more interested as an artist himself in what I've done, and was the curator of the exhibit that kind of prompted this lecture at the Hunt Gallery, and had intended to show some of the ephemera that's in every artist's studio, but in my studio as well, those things that we have around that don't eventually get exhibited, but also become part of the kind of creative spice rack that exists in the art studio, where you can draw from those things all the time to alter the work that you're making. Is that right, Martin? Are you ready?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of just did it for me.
Okay.
But I can go ahead and start sharing these.
Okay.
Everyone see these images okay?
Yeah.
Or this image, okay. Yeah, so I think, we talked about the show, maybe being somewhat of a retrospective, which was not something that Tom was particularly interested in, and felt like a bit of a daunting task. And you'll see a little bit later that the show is more of a collection of this newer body of work. And this kind of, if you know the Hunt Gallery, most of you of course know this, there's this small side room, and this small side room is going to hold this collection of ephemera and studio kind of objects, and also like one-off pieces that were being pulled out of drawers and flat files and off of shelves, etc. There's a lot of things that I've never seen before, a lot of things I think Tom had not seen in years. And I'll kind of just be flipping through these as I continue to talk. And I think there's a lot of things you see here, just small forms, you know, this kind of sock in the upper left-hand corner, these, you know, drawings and prints cut out of books, labels, photographs, kind of collage photographs, things that you'll see that, I don't know if you could put a date to any of these things. Any idea, Tom? A date for any of these last few things?
This one was a kind of found collage, obviously cropped, but for a photographic exhibit, and it was exhibited as a photograph of that. But it was a billboard in the south of France, in Sarlat, and it does relate to the way I work. The layering that's on those billboards in France was interesting, because one thing would get pasted, and then something completely irrelevant would get pasted over it, and eventually this kind of unexpected relationship would emerge. And here you have kind of that image on the left of the kind of legs swinging on a trapeze, and a statement of a zoo, and then some kind of directions for other things happening here. And so, as you know, Martin, from being in France, these surprises exist not only on billboards, but everywhere else. And the kind of layering of experience and time is something I'm really interested in.
And would you think that this was from maybe the 70s?
This is probably from the 70s, my first visit to the south of France. Yeah, probably after I was studying with Hayter and traveling back and forth to the Dordogne in the south.
Yeah, so you really kind of see this collection of, you know, work, pieces that might not be considered fully serious or might not be considered fully fleshed out, maybe sketches, maybe maybe finished works as well. Some things were framed, some things were, you know, in a box with 50 other similar works that kind of provide this nice archive of, you know, you see Ohio Greyhound bus tickets here, which is a time, you know, kind of suggesting to a different time where he was studying or going back home. And I think there's also elements of, you know, like this face in the middle that I think I've seen occur in other works, this not negotiable at the top that I'm not sure exactly what that's from. But it reminds me of kind of some of the work you've done with like legal tender and money as well. But also cropping faces and adding these drawn elements back in. I love this series of work. I think Kate has seen a few of these and actually has one as well, of these really interesting domestic scenes that are incorporating drawn elements and photographic collage. And then also some things working with paper and with nature and with sticks from outside in the yard. I think there were some, you'll see some paper pieces from the actual exhibition, but less sculptural maybe than this.
Yeah, this one was a suggestion made by a tree that fell on my studio. And so kind of picking up the pieces of the branches and constructing this kind of alphabet, kind of a semic writing sort of alphabet that looks like a script of some sort, but not really kind of translatable in any way.
Yeah, I like that they looked both like letters and like tools for something that I wasn't quite sure about. You know, they each have these little strings there's strings kind of holding them together, but also strings to hang them. So they kind of feel like they have a purpose, but they're made of paper. So maybe that purpose is kind of satirical a little bit. then some more recent sketches as well, with some figures you'll see across other works. You could tell me maybe your story about the bunny.
Yeah, that's a story that I tell most of the students when I'm really teaching in printmaking, when I'm doing demos, and the bunny, the rabbit gets into the discussion. I would always bring our pet rabbit, Paco, into the drawing class to be a model. He was a great model, would sit on a table very quietly and then move to one side for the class and then move to the other side. And then one day I went to get Paco. I had promised the students I'd bring Paco in to draw from, and I found that Paco had passed away. And so you lose a pet, you get sad, but you get caught also in your own proclamations. And I'd always told students that art was about life and death, and life, it's a serious matter. It's on the edge of a cliff. And so I thought, I've got to bring Paco into the class. So I went in, prepared the class, set up the model stand, tilted at an angle, and set Paco out. And the students drew without taking a break. Some students were tearing up and crying while they were drawing. One student in particular made a beautiful drawing and then erased half of it to finish the drawing. So it was one of the best drawing classes that you could possibly have, where the object, what you're doing, the process, and the meaning and everything comes together as kind of one thing. So I often use this story just to kind of make a point.
I think maybe from that story, the motif has come up again and again. Mm-hmm. Here you'll see a sketch for a piece that I don't know if it was fully produced exactly like this with what looked like some hinges or something in the middle, but a piece that was shown at Hoffman on the Chance, an opening at Hoffman on the Chance maybe 2 years ago now, 3 years ago.
3 years, yeah.
And I kind of love these little more casual sketches that are around the studio. Some text and some repeated drawings across the page. Kind of wishbone over on the left.
Plans for sculpture.
I also really love how he draws himself.
Just there for scale.
And then there's some fun things in the studio too. Tom is an accomplished baseball player. He claims to have thrown, I think, several no-hitters, if not at least one perfect game.
Was that during COVID, Martin?
What, when he was throwing? Yeah, I don't know.
No-hitters?
But it's kind of a nice mix of things throughout the studio. And I think even just looking at this, you can kind of see some sort of sensibilities with text and with this ornamentation on the sides. Particularly like this drawing of the strong man. And I don't know if, I know this is an image you've used over the years. You were looking to try and find the earliest reference to it. And I think this is a pretty early one. You'd said that when you kind of revisited it and traced it. And then I like that there's this boot print over it, that it had, kind of fallen to the studio floor and then had this direct impact from you on top of it.
Yeah, it was hanging around. It was undergraduate painting class, and I submitted a series of these drawings, and then later did a painting, which I've been trying to find the image of. And students now have the advantage of taking beautiful digital pictures of their work with their cell phone. But in those days, with paintings or ceramics or anything else, you kind of went outside, got not such good camera and leaned it up against a tree and took a photograph for a slide. And I haven't been able to find the slide of one of the main paintings that kind of came out of this first group of sketches.
So here's another one that he actually just sent me the other night, kind of another certificate from the Cartoonist Exchange, which I wasn't really fully aware of his cartooning background, but perhaps it's evident in some of the drawings as well.
Good example of the first kind of wasn't online education, it was mail order education. And so my parents, who were interested in my drawing ability and my interest in drawing, signed me up for this cartoonist exchange. And every week I would do a cartoon, send it off, and then I would get back a critique in the mail of my cartoon.
Did you have to draw the pirate first?
Pardon me?
Did you have to draw the pirate first?
No, it wasn't, they didn't give specific things you had. So they were all pretty much original drawings that I was sending off. But what was interesting was the critiques were completely canned generic things that they sent to everybody, like nice work, keep going, kind of things that they could, so they weren't in any way personal.
So it was sort of like an early Instagram.
Exactly.
But they just liked it for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they keep the drawings, or did they send the drawings back as well?
They sent the drawings back. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I have those somewhere too, but who knows?
Some more kind of collage work, and I think collage is really, a theme that you'll see throughout the exhibition and throughout kind of this archive of work. And I don't know that it's necessarily the first word that he would use to describe any of the work, but I think it's really, really there. Here's another photograph that was in the studio, this kind of stone man assembled on a beach somewhere, probably either in France or in Missouri.
Yeah, there were series.
Not really sure.
There were a lot of these that I'd make everywhere where I could find them. And I think I was kind of poking a little fun at Andy Goldsworthy, our friend who makes much more serious work. And I was trying to, because everybody now starts piling up rocks when they get somewhere to try to make their own Andy Goldsworthy. And I just wanted to make these silly kind of figurative things, showing people. But I left them there. I'd take the photograph and leave them there. I thought it also would be interesting, the next person that had to come along that riverbank would find this stone person kind of thing there. So
Sure.
Probably goes back to Alan Capro came to our graduate school, gave a talk, and one of the things he talked about was all the things that he did that never got documented, that there were things that he would make, and he didn't see the point of like presenting them as art. For him, it was kind of something he had to do and kind of a research, but it would be there if somebody found it, and if they didn't find it, it didn't really matter. So it challenged a lot of assumptions that, especially graduate schools at the time, most of them were working with kind of abstract expressionism type stuff or early pop art elements. And so I found it quite interesting. I thought he was just terrific.
So again, kind of seeing the bunny pop up, even just on this, this sticky note sketch over here on the left. So you saw this picture during the last talk, but my brother Peter in the studio with him in the 70s, 80s. What did you say this was?
Yeah, well, Peter's, yeah, probably was the 70s. print a pearl clamshell press that I had. We were printing type and woodblock images. My studio has always been at the point of that photo, and I think the point of showing it is similar to the image that I sent Emily to put on the announcement for the show, where I'm standing there with Claude Monet. And I visited Giverny, and I'd never really wanted to go to Giverny because I'd seen the water lily so many times and watched people sit around and moan and cry, and I just thought it's too much. But when I got to Giverny, I realized he was doing the same thing I was doing. He was living with all that stuff. Everywhere around his place was the image of his work. His studio was part of his house. In fact, as it exists right now, it was just the way it was when he passed away. So it was really quite a intense experience, even though there were lots of other tourists there. You felt like you were getting close to some part of history. But having the studio at home was really always important to me, and having it be kind of as much as possible a family event was great too. I'd had studios outside the house and found I didn't like it as much or work as much, or that's really me there, standing there.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting for me to see this photo because my brother and I are separated by 20 years, and so we didn't really grow up living together so much. But I've been very much in his position in this photo, so then to see him in the same position was really interesting. And kind of to understand we both had the same experience at different stages.
And that one stool there still exists.
I think that apron does too that you're wearing.
Studio. I'm still wearing the same apron that I wore when I was at Atelier 17 in Paris too. That was like everybody wore those kind of smocks, kind of protect themselves. So.
It's really nice, kind of just simple cropped image of hands on a baseball bat. And then this sculpture that's been in the studio for as long as I can possibly remember, that's always kind of intrigued and confused me. That's this, this chair with, I assume the sort of back and the seat are actually pulled from a real chair. And then the legs and uprights have been replaced with these brooms. And it's always hung on the wall in this way that I've never sat in it. And I've always kind of thought about sitting up on the wall in it and sitting perched up. It's been usually up higher than that. So it's really this kind of like lookout in the studio. And I think particularly when I was younger and I didn't know as much of Tom's work, I didn't really know any kind of sculptural work. So it was always this kind of mystery object that existed in the studio that I wasn't sure if he had made, if somebody else had made, why it was there, where it came from, if it was, functional for some kind of reason that I didn't yet understand. And I really liked the kind of mix of these, real found objects, for lack of a better term. But then into this, decorative, semi-functional chair.
Yeah, the broom on both ends, the kind of broom with on both ends has been something I've used. And there's a broom was in the show at the recent show too, that you'll see later. Came from something that Man Ray said, that the artist and the violinist and the barber and the artist all use the same tools, a stick with hairs on it, but they are all trying to do something different. The barber and the violinist are trying to do what they do as well as they can, and the artist is just trying to be as free as they can. And so that was part of it. The other was kind of this idea of endless labor and the kind of relationship between labor and economics and who does the work and who makes the money. And so there was other stuff going on too. But there was a show at Elliott Smith Gallery, and he wanted artists who were part of the gallery stable to do chairs. And so I made this chair and another one. And both of them, I had the idea that on the seat of the chair, there'd be this little train going around that would also relate back to the train behind the house in the studio here. Elliot didn't like either one of the chairs, and put the other one, I put the other one in the show, and he put it all the way in the back of the gallery so he could kind of hide it away. But I got some great comments of it. That one doesn't exist anymore. I'm not sure if it got deconstructed or somebody bought it or what happened to it.
I think that's actually the last image I have from this set of photographs. So you can move on to the video.
Okay. Yeah, what we're going to see here is think back to last March. And that's when the exhibition at the real exhibition at the Hunt Gallery in person was intended to happen. And I had taken a group of students, 15 of students, to Cuba, to Havana, to have a wonderful experience down there. We teamed up with the art school in Havana, ISA, and were able to do students were able to do some great work. And they saw some wonderful things around Havana. But as we were there, especially from Martin, I kept getting the message, well, everything's changed back here. In Cuba, there were no cases of the virus, and but they were already prepared to deal with it. But by the time we got back, everything had shut down, including Webster and the Hunt Gallery. And so a few weeks after I got back, I decided to go over and see the gallery and walk through. And so there I am with a mask walking around. The audio is not very good, so I'll just talk over the video as I'm walking around.
Hi, everyone.
As you can see.
Just a glimpse of the show that didn't happen
So,
in March. We just take a little walk around here and look at some things.
yeah, it seems like I'm kind of in a trance there as I'm walking around, and as I'm pointing at the work, I'm trying to also. I think I was thinking that this would be for my students, and not necessarily for this moment, but just to kind of share with them what I've been working on. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I just was asked a question by a friend last night. As you look at these pieces, do you remember everything, every decision you made, every kind of mistake or change or everything? And no, I said, no, I don't remember at all. In fact, when I look at them, they're like, they're distant. There's a distance there. And I recall the experience in undergraduate school in my senior year there of having made a painting and walking by the painting studio, looking at the painting and wondering whose painting it was. And it was my painting. And I think there's something about that happens after you make a piece of work, that you no longer are attached to it in a way that you are in the process. And it kind of relates to, I was trying to remember this Wallace Stevens quote, the poet Wallace Stevens. He said, I don't know what I like better, the beauty of inclination or the beauty of innuendo. the song of the blackbird or immediately after. So there is a kind of joy and beauty in the process, but there's a different kind of beauty after everything's done and finished. It's interesting to watch. As you're looking around, I did make, if you could stop the video for a minute, I did kind of make certain decisions at the beginning of this work, that they'd all be the same size, that it would also all begin with a kind of given, something that I owned or found or had in my collection of objects that was a non-art thing. And then they would be layered through different technological processes so that their identity as an object would be a little bit off, whether it's a photograph or whether it's a collage or whether it's a painting or whether it's a digital print, wouldn't be quite exactly part of the idea of the object, although I think they end up looking more like paintings than anything else. There's still a little bit of a ambiguity in terms of their technical idea. And people have asked me, including not so long ago, somebody asked me if there was any handmade paper in there, which I found kind of hard to imagine, but I guess it could have been. They were all first made by collage, and then the collage was photographed or scanned, and then the scanned version was printed digitally, and then they were drawn, painted, and stenciled with other images on the paper, and then the paper was mounted on a panel, a wooden panel, and then the wooden panel continued to work. Anything that I didn't like from the work that was going on, or anything that seemed to be a mistake, would be covered up in a kind of obvious way. So the covering, the patching, would be part of the piece rather than trying to make that disappear. So I wanted the mistakes to be part of them. Yeah, I think that move on. This was the last piece in the show. I'm pointing at it, telling you in the bad audio that it was the last piece. And I was kind of tired of looking at that image of the coronavirus. But I was fascinated by how much it looked like undersea creatures, and it looked like something that in other ways could be seen as kind of a beautiful and interesting thing. Now we're walking past some of the paperworks that would have been in the show and didn't get in the final kind of virtual exhibition because they would be difficult to kind of experience and see in that way. And then there was going to be trays with the ephemera that Martin talked about that would also have been there to be part of the exhibition. And I think I'm walking back over to this group of collages. For years, the Department of Art, Design and Art History had a wonderful art program in Vienna. And one of the last times I was in Vienna, I was holed up in my apartment during a very rainy week, day after day, lots of rain, teaching the classes, but coming back to the apartment in the evening and feeling a bit isolated. And I had some scrap paper there, some black bags from purchasing things at stores and some red bags from purchasing things at stores. And so I made about 20 collages with those bags and then tucked them away. And then when I got back to St. Louis, they were photoshopped and became kind of digital prints, and then the digital prints became printed and then became part of this series. So this was the part of the Vienna Red and Black series that probably more than most of the other works works better as a grouping rather than individually, because they all kind of talk to one another about different moments being in Vienna, walking around Vienna, and experiencing Vienna, Austria.
Tom, I have a question.
Sure.
You know, it's really interesting to see this work and see you walking and hear you talking and telling the stories around the work. The piece of ephemera in your studio that triggers and begins one of the collages, or, you know, the rainy night in Vienna.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when people see the exhibition, it's without all of that story and context. I guess my question is, have you given thought to how much that context enriches the experience for the viewer, speaking for myself, and how that might go into your work in the future, especially now that we're working in a way where we share differently?
Yeah, it's as I'm thinking about answering your question, I'm thinking about, should I try to agree with you or disagree with you? And
Well, I guess
I would say I'm looking at the flowers outside my window, and I don't have to know anything about anything underneath the ground or anything that happened with the rain falling on them or anything to kind of appreciate the flowers. So that's kind of.
I guess what I'm saying is that I think your paintings strike me as very elegant haikus, but there is also a quality to your teaching and to your being an inspirational artistic person that is more of a folklore. And maybe it's you as a whole that completes all those ways of giving, and it's not for the art to do all of that. But I suppose it's more of a comment. So you don't need to disagree or agree, because I'm right.
I think with some of the work, you're exactly right. Some of the work is much more personal and maybe not so easy to kind of experience and bring your own experience to that. But I think some of them, there's one piece in the show in particular, I would say, as an example, and we probably can't call it up right now. It's the hand holding something that's in the work. Maybe Martin can find it. I don't know. We'll see it later. And that piece, I've had so many people bring their own experience to that, and so it kind of trumps. I don't want to use that word. It cancels that my experience, and it becomes their experience. And I like that better. That
yours is.
Again, it goes back to that ownership of the work. The work is off on its own now, and they can bring their experience to it. It's not changing any of the meaning. It's just kind of findings that they can. There's another one, Gone, there, that I found it to be a very kind of sad one, where the hands are holding and they're about to reveal something. And it probably goes back to my teaching of photography and was it Cartier-Bresson, the moment before and after, trying to find that middle ground where something, and I think the ones that are successful in this group have that kind of experience. Tate called them snapshots, and as I think that was an appropriate thing, that they are kind of a momentary thing, even though they look like kind of formal paintings in a way. So we got the video up now of the exhibit, and I guess we could play that. This is the video that was made by Karen Birch, and my son Peter, who's a musician, did this soundscape for it, which I think, from my point of view, made it the virtual exhibit really look great and a nice experience. So we'll go through that. Okay, I enjoyed it.
It's great. It's great.
So we're at 12:46 right now. We can have a little discussion and answer some questions. I've got some images that go back. In the catalog, there was one mistake. The catalog talked about me having a heart attack in 2006. Actually, it was 2016. And it was where this work actually began. Somehow I found out last night that there was this mistake in the catalog. I didn't see it.
I don't know how that,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Our friend Duke came by and said, "Why? So I thought your heart attack was just a couple of years ago. What's going on?" So, and the importance of that is that was where some of the work, where the work actually began. And as we look for questions, I'll kind of just put some of that stuff on.
Can I just pick up on that very thing, because I was going to ask you about fragmentation, and seeing the early collages really makes me think more about that, the hint of meaning. But that comment is even more interesting, because as I was thinking about fragmentation, it made me think of an old piece by Bruce Nauman, and I'm sure you know it. It's the spiral neon that says the true artist reveals the world by revealing mystic truths.
Yeah.
And he didn't know if he meant that or if he was trying to be in a dialogue with that statement. But if that's the moment that you were kind of thinking of this work, that is really interesting of that statement to me. That's, I don't know if it's a comment or question, but.
Yeah, well, I know that piece. I was just going to put this on. Does everybody see that screen now? No? I'm trying to share my screen, but. No?
It's disabled in Emily's
Oh,
corner.
okay.
I can pull the image up if you want me to, Emily, and Tom can keep talking.
Yeah, he's got a slideshow.
Oh, okay.
You should be able to. It's the green share screen at the bottom, and then just select the window.
That's what I did. Okay.
Jerry, I was sharing screen.
Okay. I'll give up on that. That doesn't seem to be working. Yeah, Jeff, I think that's interesting because there are things exactly like that come up as you're working, and you don't know if it's something that you're actually trying to find out or if you're something that you actually know. But I was thinking of that in relation to students, and I'm sure the students can relate to this. As you're making work, sometimes you discover things, and then you find somebody who's already discovered that. Maybe somebody has made a quote that you read and you think, oh yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I think you should find that validating rather than think, oh, this is, I've got somebody else's idea here. Darn it, I wish I'd thought of that first. And I think it points to the value of the creative process. But the other thing about Martin's presentation, all the stuff that's there, I think creating this environment where you're taking in lots of stuff, that you're building a rich place, that really enhances the creative process too, to be able to kind of, and look, and you mentioned Bruce Nauman, and we've got these people that we see as kind of real heroes. John Cage, Emily mentioned John Cage earlier, a true hero, somebody who changed the way we think about things, who in my experience actually turned me around 360 degrees in terms of my thinking about what art was and what it meant to be an artist. One of the things in the new work was allowing myself to just appreciate that and let it become part of my work rather than thinking that I had to kind of be. So there are a lot of things in that last show where I was saying, okay, I'm channeling so-and-so, or I'm channeling, including, lots of other folks in the group, like Matisse, who's somebody I've been fond of for years just because of the longevity of his work and kind of the fact that I just really enjoy it and just really love it every time I see it. And there was something, I think I mentioned this last time we talked, that Robert Irwin said that the confusion between the idea and the object gets people not to realize that the real meaning of art has to do with feeling. And of course, Robert Irwin's work really goes to that. He really kind of goes to about feeling and has taken that into kind of a whole dealing with the environment and everything in a way that's so important. But I think that feeling is really interesting.
When Jeff brings up this idea of fragmenting, it makes me think of the collages.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep making this connection, and I don't know where the question is, but I'm just going to offer you this to speak to, if you will. How does that recycling of layers, I mean, the collages are essentially already beginning as somebody else's bits and pieces, so you don't have to worry about do you own them, but you continue to layer and reveal and layer and reveal. How does making connect with memory making for you, or memory sifting? Yeah,
I can give you a couple of different answers to that. One, I think our own experience day to day is a collage. But you edit things as you have a lot of these things that occur to you, and you see a nun walking with a saw, you see somebody walking a dog, you see the rain begins to fall, all these things, but you edit what's only important to you. So I think that part of it is our experience is kind of a collage, and even more so today with everything that's coming from digital means, as well as just the real experience of walking around. But I think the other thing, if I can remember where I was going with this, is when I was doing these first collages that Martin was showing, I had a big box of material and I was pulling things out and trying to arrange them in a formal way. And then one by one, as I looked at the collages, I realized that everything I'd selected had happened within 1 week of the thing. So I was gathering them out of the box kind of randomly, but as I was assembling them, they somehow all related to one another in terms of time, as well as just the formal kind of arrangement on the page. And I found it kind of disturbing and shocking at that time, like, wow, there's something going on here that I don't quite get.
But they had a connection that they required, and you were there to hear the suggestion.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it kind of
Sounds Cagean.
Huh? Yeah.
Sounds Cagean, yeah, at the time.
And so, you know, I said something to Annie, who wrote the essay in the catalog, about we don't really understand time. And that's part of it. I think there's, I wish I could remember the author's name, a brief kind of essay on time. Claudio, it's an Italian physicist, and he wrote this wonderful thing. There's so much that we don't know about how we experience time. We divide it up for convenience with minutes and hours and things. And yeah, so that's for the collage thing.
And I think that the work in this body really speaks to, as you know, you said, Tate referred to them as snapshots, but they feel like their own unique little here and nows. The ephemera that Martin shared, and having both Martin and Peter part of this grand process in your life and in your work stretches time back. And I'd kind of like to ask, what are your thoughts about your work after today? This has a lot of recycling, but also some sense of closure. What do you feel is coming next?
Well, that's always an interesting question. I know there's something coming next. And
I have to land on your roof to find out what it is.
And I think you asked that question the other day, something about, and I forget what the answer was I gave you then. You know, this group of work seemed like an opportunity to look at backwards in a different way and kind of pull things together. And it also gave me a kind of freedom to move on to something else. So what I'm working on right now are several kind of book projects, artist book type things that will probably take some of the smaller ideas that Martin was talking about, the ephemera and small ideas, and try to put them together into some sort of folio of some kind as a kind of sequence or series, kind of a different kind of container. But I don't think it'll be wall pieces. I don't think it'll be things on the wall.
I think Thomas Wharton has a nice question lined up.
Okay.
You can turn on his mic.
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Tom. How you doing?
Good. How you, man?
Good.
So when referencing Andy Goldworthy, you claimed he made much more serious work. And I was wondering if you can talk more about your personal attitude toward making art. You know, when does it, if ever, become important for you to make an artwork?
You know, I think when you're making art, you have to be mindful of the fact that what you're doing is the most important thing in the world you can possibly do, and at the same time, it's completely meaningless. I think that has to be somehow present. That you, again, maybe it's a Cagean idea about meaning in general. You know, am I important? Are you important? What's important? But specifically in relation to Andy, I think it's more, and he probably wouldn't like the idea that he's doing serious work either. Because I think people who look at his work find it like incredibly serious. And I've always told him that I think he's right on the edge between like being kind of a decorative artist, you know, like I'm making things that are mere decorations. But and recently he's been quarantined like the rest of us, and he's been sending me all these photographs of the work that he's doing, and some of them seem downright silly, but also profound in an interesting way. He's been crawling into trees. He's found trees around his property that have kind of big openings on the bottom, and he somehow crawls inside them and sits in there for a while. And so it's a stupid idea, right? But also kind of, when you think about it a little bit, that this is kind of mysterious and kind of it's like alchemy or something, kind of somehow becoming part of the tree. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you think about serious stuff? Your work looks very serious.
Yeah, I know, it's funny. But I think, I don't know, just in terms of the question, I was also thinking about your exhibition title, Scratching, and just the relationship between maybe, because I also think Andy's work isn't very serious either. It's like he is climbing through a tree, and and then there's that moment of like, well, why are you doing it? And then looking at your work, or like scrounging through a box, or your travel, or your history, or also like, even the tree branch early on that you said like the tree was responsible for you. It was an inspiration, or was asking to become paper. Like, well, why does that happen? When does it happen? And so I just
you miss as many of those opportunities as you respond to. Carol was asking me earlier. I used to have a thing outside my studio, a kind of a piece of 1/4-inch steel that I put leaves on and kind of kept piling them up. And I used to tell everyone that I would gather up sycamore leaves from outside the studio, and that was my ticket to go into the studio. So I had to have permission to go in the studio, and so I had to do something. And it was just kind of a ritual, and stupid and silly in a way, but it also gives some credit to that idea that the studio, things happen in the studio that don't happen other places. And so that, you know, without getting too far, calling it a sacred space may be a little bit of a stretch, but I've done that before. I've called it a sacred space, and I think it is, in a way, a rarefied space at the very least, where things happen that before you go in there, you don't know what to do, and you go in there, and all of a sudden things start to take place, and before you know it, you're working. So that's the importance. That's the message for students. But right now it's difficult. Find your own studio and be there and be working.
I just want to open it up. Do we have any questions from the students that are logged in?
Yeah, raise your hand. No.
Raise your hand or put it in the chat. That usually helps me know sort of who to call on. Or just unmute and speak right up. That works too. Oh, we got a lot of silent people today.
No questions.
I see how it is.
One question that Carol had asked me earlier that she thought was on students' mind was about control. And she wanted to know how I felt about control in my work, you know, and I've always been kind of anti-technique, even though probably if you look at this new work, it probably looks really controlled. And the example I gave her was, it's like flying a kite. You know, you get everything together and you kind of go out to a nice place and you start running and you get the kite up and it falls down again, kind of goes up. So you are kind of in control in a way, but you're also relying on something else that you have no control over. And then even when it gets finally up in the air and is flying, you're still in control in a way, but you're still you're vulnerable to some other forces that you have no control over. So I think when you're making work, that same thing happens, that you obviously have to have some control, and you have to be willing to let other things that you don't quite understand yet take over, whether it's random occurrences or just lack of skill or other things. You have to accept those things. Failures have to be accepted and become part of a record of your stuff, evidence.
We've got a question from one of Terry's students. How did studying art in a foreign culture, especially one so well known for producing astonishing art, influence your style and views of art?
Oh, that's a really great question. And the real answer is kind of go find out for yourself. I mean, it's amazing to go. First time I went to France and went to the Louvre and walked in, I felt like I was inside my art history book. I thought, wow, I'm here and I'm looking at things that were on the screen, too big, way too big. And now I'm looking at, and the experience was completely different. I wouldn't be exaggerating to say it kind of sends chills down your spine to see something for the first time that you've only seen as a photograph or a slide on the screen or something like that. So it's pretty amazing. And then most recently, traveling to Cuba, which is so rich, not only with different kinds of direct art and music and everything else to experience, but the amazing thing that seemed relevant, especially about this trip, was they make do with much less, and they also don't waste anything. So at the art school, the advanced painters were painting on recycled materials. They were painting on newspapers, they were painting on other things. They're making these fabulous, beautiful paintings. Went to the print studio there. They were making sculptures out of the wood blocks that they'd made prints of. So they printed the edition and they were cutting the wood blocks apart to make sculpture out of the wood blocks. So because it's very difficult to get, there's no art stores, there's no Art Mart or Dick Blick. You can't go to the store and buy other materials. So they were making things in another way, which seemed kind of liberating and inventive. And but Martin's been to Cuba too, and maybe it's influenced him in some way that I don't know. But certainly Vienna was a big experience, and France continues to be have a real impact. But also being in Japan, and so students should, especially because Webster has such a great study abroad program, and it'll come back when we can travel again. Got to take advantage of it and use it.
All right, Rachel Brown wants to know what your favorite place to visit around the world is. You have one.
Well, I have my favorites, and certainly Cuba's one of my favorites now to go to. But the south of France, which is where I'd be right now talking to you if I could, but because we have so much infection in our country, the French don't want us. Most of the other countries don't want us, so we can't really travel. I can't really travel anywhere right now. But Vienna used to be my favorite, but I think Havana has taken over kind of that position for me now, just because it's equally rich and interesting. But I'll discover new places too. I've had work shown in Portugal, but I've never been to Portugal. So I'd love to do that. You mentioned the show in Switzerland, and I've been through Switzerland, but I never was there to that city, which I think is a really great place. So I'm open to going.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up, but I have a question that
Okay.
is really gonna serve my class because it's something that we've been sort of talking about. I'm talking about failure and this idea of resiliency a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how do you as an artist cultivate resiliency in your studio practice or
Yeah.
just in your life?
Yeah. Yeah. And by resilience, you mean coming back from a failure or a difficulty or problem? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, really just coming back every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I think about studio practice, it's like you said, you know, you enjoy having the studio as your home
Yeah.
because you find that you make more work. So how do you cultivate that?
Years ago, I wrote an essay and I did some research on failure, and I tried to find out a lot of information from sources in psychology and educational sources on failure, because from my point of view, was the creative process embraces failure, and if it doesn't embrace failure, then there's a problem. So, so I think once you recognize that one of the best things you can do is fail, you put all of your skill, all of your understanding, all of your craftspersonship, all of your understanding and sincerity into the work, and it still comes out like crap. And you look at it and think, that's great. Because what it means is you have standards, and not everything you make is going to be up to your standards. What doesn't have to be somebody else's standards, but won't be up to your standards. And so you have to recognize that as a very positive moment, because if you can recognize your failure, then you can move beyond that. So that might speak to resilience in some way. But I mean, you know, a lot of cliches like that, you know, get knocked down, you get up, that kind of thing. But it was brought home to me in a critique years ago, and we were talking about what was the most important thing that a student learned in the critique. And a student started talking and started tearing up and crying and saying, I learned that I fail a lot. And that's been the most important thing that I've learned this semester. And because so much of our emphasis in school and everything else is about success, grade inflation, and doing everything, we kind of hide that experience of failure to a great degree. And I think celebrating it or recognizing it or using it is really important. There's text.
My text.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that, Tom.
Yeah. Thanks for the questions. And yeah, if you're recording everything, do you also record the questions that are there? And I can kind of.
Tom, there's a beautiful quote, a couple of sentences by Jerry. Maybe Jerry, we would want to read those out loud. It'd be a perfect place to close, I think.
Well, I actually thought a perfect place to close would be, well, okay, I'll say these and then I think what the perfect, when you were talking about your stones, it of course took me back to when you go to Hawaii or when you go to the Southwest, you see stacked stones. But I think in Hawaii, especially when you're on just plain lava and water, you can't really tell what direction you're going. And so the people stack stones to give direction because you don't have signs, you don't have roads. And so I always thought that Andy Goldsworthy either intuited that or picked that up somewhere. And then the other thing is the baobab tree has often, the hollowness of it those trees are big enough to become coffins, especially in Africa. So they'll put the whole body in there. And then the last story that I don't have on here is that I was reading a book, something about snow in Japan. Some of you may remember it. And there were two young people who met, and they would hide in a hollow tree. And so those moments are not only present, but they have this history that we don't even know about. And so the way I would like to close this, if we are closing, is to say, and ask everybody to join me and unmute and turn on their video and say, "Yay, Tom! Good show! Thank you so much for being our leader, our artist leader. We love you."
Thanks for leaving your stacked stones for us to follow, Tom.
Yes,
Mm.
they're
Those
like
were-
petroglyphs, really.
Those are leaves.
Oh,
No, the stones.
Okay.
Way back.
Oh,
And
you thought
said
they were
we're kind of silly.
Yeah.
You know me. I come in at the end.
great. Oh, thanks.
You wrap it up for us, Jerry.
Thanks for everybody.
All right.
And
Good, Tom.
You guys have a
Yeah.
wonderful day and fail big time today.
thanks for
Right.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.